Roman aqueducts remain one of the most grand and impressive achievements of ancient engineering anywhere in the world. These monumental structures did far more than simply supply water to millions of people scattered across the empire. They became a powerful symbol of civilization itself, of technological superiority, of urban hygiene, and of the sheer reach of Roman power. While most ancient cultures built their cities along the banks of major rivers and stayed there, the Romans learned instead to bend the landscape to their will, carrying pristine mountain water across tens and even hundreds of kilometers to wherever they needed it. The origins and growth of the system. Before the first aqueduct was ever built, the people of Rome drew their water from the Tiber River, along with local wells and natural springs scattered around the city. But as Rome's population and territory grew, the Tiber grew steadily more polluted, and the existing wells simply could not keep pace with demand. The first aqueduct, the Aqua Appia, was completed in 312 BCE under the censor Appius Claudius Caecus, the same man who began construction of the Appian Way. It ran for roughly 16 kilometers, and almost the entire route was built underground, a deliberate choice meant to protect the water supply from enemy sabotage during wartime. A second aqueduct, the Annio Vetus, followed in 272 BCE, financed with spoils captured during the war against Pyrrhus. It ran considerably farther, roughly 64 kilometers, and like its predecessor, it too ran mostly underground. As the empire expanded and Rome's wealth grew, demand for water grew right alongside it, and engineers increasingly needed to build elevated arcades to carry water across valleys without losing the carefully calculated downward slope the whole system depended on. By the 1st century CE, more than a dozen aqueducts supplied the city. Among the most celebrated were the Aqua Marcia, completed in 144 BCE and prized for the exceptional quality and coolness of its water, and the Aqua Claudia and Annio Novus, both finished around 52 CE under the Emperor Claudius, genuine architectural masterpieces, their arches rising as high as 28 meters and marching for kilometers across the open Roman countryside. By the system's peak in the 3rd century CE, 11 major aqueducts supplied the city, their combined length running past 400 kilometers, delivering hundreds of millions of liters of water into Rome every single day. The engineering behind the system. The central challenge facing every Roman aqueduct engineer was that the Romans had no electric pumps of any kind. The entire system depended on one force alone, gravity. Water flowed continuously downhill, from a mountain spring, through kilometers of underground channel and the occasional elevated arcade, into a central distribution point in the city, and from there out to fountains, baths, and private homes. Making that work required an extraordinarily precise calculation of slope. Water needed to move fast enough to stay in continuous flow and avoid stagnation, yet slow enough that it would not erode the walls of the channel itself. The average gradient across Roman aqueducts fell somewhere between just 1/10 and 0.5%, in practical terms, a drop of only 1 to 3 meters over an entire kilometer of distance, a level of precision that is genuinely difficult to achieve even with modern surveying equipment. To measure angles and plan a route with that kind of accuracy, Roman surveyors, known as librators, relied on a small set of specialized instruments. The groma was used for sighting and aligning straight lines and right angles. The chorobates, a long wooden straightedge roughly 6 meters in length fitted with a water-filled trough that functioned as a level, allowed engineers to read the slope of the terrain with real precision. And the dioptra, a more sophisticated Greco-Roman device, could measure both angles and changes in elevation across greater distances. None of this would have worked without Roman concrete itself. The Romans mixed volcanic ash, known as pozzolana, together with lime and rubble aggregate to produce a mortar with genuinely waterproof properties, one capable of curing and hardening even underwater. That single innovation made it possible to build watertight channels and durable piers able to stand in riverbeds and wet ground for centuries without failing. Contrary to popular imagination, the soaring arched bridges most people picture when they hear the word aqueduct actually made up only 10 to 20% of the total length of the system. The overwhelming majority, somewhere between 80 and 90%, ran underground, in simple buried channels. Underground construction was cheaper, the surrounding cool soil helped protect the water from evaporation and contamination, and a buried channel was far harder for an enemy army to locate and sabotage. Elevated arcades and bridges were reserved specifically for the places where engineers had no other option, crossing river valleys or low ground without losing the carefully maintained slope the whole system relied on. Where a valley was simply too deep for an arched bridge to be practical, Roman engineers turned to an entirely different solution, the inverted siphon, built from sealed lead or stone pipe running on the principle of connected vessels. Water descended from one hillside, built up pressure at the bottom of the valley, and used that same pressure to climb back up the far side, arriving at close to its original height without ever needing a bridge at all. Where the water went. The distribution system. At the point where an aqueduct entered the city, its water flowed into a central distribution basin known as the Castellum Aquae, or water castle. There, the water passed through settling tanks for one final round of purification before being split, through lead or ceramic pipes, into three main channels of distribution. Public fountains and street corner spigots came first, by clear priority. This was where ordinary citizens drew their drinking water, free of charge. Next came the public bathhouses, enormous complexes like the baths of Caracalla or the baths of Diocletian, which consumed staggering volumes of water for their pools and hygienic facilities. Only after those two came private homes and villas, and access there was reserved almost entirely for the wealthy patrician elite, who paid a special tax for the privilege of a direct household connection. Maintenance and oversight. Building an aqueduct was only half the challenge, keeping one running required constant, disciplined management. Under the Emperor Augustus, Rome established a dedicated state office to oversee the entire water system, headed by an official known as the Curator Aquarum. The most famous person to hold that post was Sextus Julius Frontinus, at the end of the 1st century CE, who wrote a remarkably detailed treatise titled De Aqueducta Urbis Romi, on the aqueducts of the city of Rome. That work survives to this day and remains the single most important primary source historians have for understanding how the Roman water system actually functioned. Frontinus's treatise makes clear that running the system was as much a battle against corruption and theft as it was an engineering problem. Mineral-rich water flowing down from the mountains left thick deposits of calcium buildup along the channel walls over time, gradually narrowing them, and maintenance crews known as aquarii had to descend regularly into the underground tunnels to scrape the walls clean by hand. But the more persistent problem, by Frontinus's own account, was human rather than mineral. Wealthy citizens routinely bribed maintenance workers to tap illegal, unmetered pipes directly into the aqueduct system to supply their private estates, quietly diverting public water for private gain. Frontinus treated this as a serious offense against the Roman state itself, and he pursued it relentlessly during his tenure, conducting what amounted to systematic audits of the entire network, tracing pipe by pipe to root out illegal connections and restore water that had effectively been stolen from the public supply. The Segovia Aqueduct, stone without mortar. Among all the surviving Roman aqueducts, the one at Segovia, in modern Spain, stands out for a construction detail that still surprises engineers today. Its towering double-tiered arcade, rising nearly 30 meters at its highest point as it crosses the heart of the old city, was built entirely from dry-fitted granite blocks. No mortar, no binding agent of any kind holds the structure together. Each block was cut with such precision that the sheer weight and geometry of the stones alone, locked against one another under gravity, has kept the bridge standing for close to 2,000 years, through wars, weather, and periodic reconstruction, and it remained in active use supplying water to Segovia until surprisingly recently, well into the 20th century. The most famous aqueducts of the Roman Empire. Rome built water systems in every corner of its vast territory, and a remarkable number of them still stand today, many recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Pont du Gard, in Nîmes, France, is a three-tiered bridge rising 49 meters and remains one of the best-preserved Roman aqueducts anywhere in the world. The Aqueduct of Valens, in modern Istanbul, was completed in the 4th century CE and served for a long stretch of history as the essential water supply for Constantinople. In Tarragona, Spain, the two-tiered bridge known as the Pont del Diable stretches 217 meters and once supplied the ancient city of Tarraco. And in Rome itself, the towering ruined arches of the Annio Novus and Aqua Claudia still stand today, forming the centerpiece of what is now known as the Parco degli Aquedotti, the Park of the Aqueducts. Decline and legacy. With the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE, maintenance of the aqueduct network began to collapse along with everything else. The decisive blow came in 537 CE, when the Ostrogoths, laying siege to Rome, deliberately destroyed key sections of the city's aqueducts in an effort to cut off water to its defenders and residents alike. Without water, the great metropolis, a city that had once held over 1 million people, began to wither rapidly. Rome's population collapsed to just a few tens of thousands, and its remaining residents were forced back to clustering along the banks of the Tiber, exactly where the city had started more than 1,000 years earlier. It was not until the Renaissance and the Baroque period that the popes of Rome began restoring the old routes. The Aqua Virgo, for instance, was revived as the Aqua Virgin, and still feeds the Trevi fountain to this day. Roman aqueducts amount to far more than monuments in stone and concrete. They stand as proof of engineering genius, of rational, methodical thinking, and of a genuine, sustained effort to improve the quality of life for an entire community. They proved that human ingenuity could reshape a landscape and command the natural world at scale, and in doing so, they laid the groundwork for modern urban planning and civil engineering as we understand it today.